I want to thank the search committee for making this week happen. Thanks so much to Bill and everybody. They've been working a year, and I hope you appreciate how many lunches that is to get through, and dinners, etc. Let me explain what I'm up to today in today's talk and for next week. What I will be saying today and next week is not a canned greatest hits sort of talk. I've been thinking through the issues with today in mind. Today, I'm going to describe my own journey to Unitarian Universalism and Humanism, some of the challenges that humanism faces in the new century as I see it, and our strengths today as I see them. Then, I'm going to spend a week hanging out around here, listening to you, and next Sunday, I will try to articulate as best I can what I see as a vision that we can share together. Then, you decide, because we practice the democratic process and the absolute freedom of the pulpit and of the pew. So working together, learning together, being together in mutual respect and honesty. After that, you decide. Now, I want you to think back for a moment. Why in the world did you ever become a Unitarian Universalist? Was it the incense and the bells? Was it the high regard that our culture holds humanism in? Were you born this way? Were you perhaps raised by crazy parents out to save the planet? Did you wear a red diaper as a child? Or are you a come-inner, a refugee from dogma and creeds and other oppressive systems? Where have you found the sacred? Did you look at the moon, like the moose, and then realize that's enough? Did you realize at some moment in a group of your beloved community, this is enough, this is where I belong? What were you before? Do you remember, musty, frightening darkness around antique statuary? Do you remember looking in your heart wondering why your belief just wasn't there? Or why, unlike others, you couldn't feel that religious thing? Or did you reason your way out? Did you ask a question like, can there be an all-powerful God who can make a stone so big God can't pick it up? Or did you begin to wonder if a CAT scan of Jesus on Easter morning would have shown anything? Did you begin to think primates act mysteriously like human beings? How was it you got here to this community? Were you born that way, or were you made? Why are you here? It isn't the bells and smells. It isn't the high regard you hold for patriarchy, I assume. What is it? Why did you seek this sanctuary? And I use that term properly, that safe place here. And how many more of you are there out there? I was born Pentecostal, and what can best be described as a Southern Methodist family, meaning the kind of Methodism I grew up in is not the kind you find right there down the hill. And most of the people have now left Methodism of that sort and have become evangelical or fundamentalist these days. Like many of you, I began to question the faith of my childhood, and when I went away to college, I lost my religion. I remember coming home at break and trying to discuss Spinoza with my parents. That happened one time, right? I remember an early American literature course reading the biographies of the writers and over again saying they were Unitarian. And I didn't know what that was because I had never been out to the East Coast. I thought Unitarianism must have been dead long ago back there. Then, in a modern American literature course, my professor, who was from Boston, one day remarked as we were reading Wallace Stevens, "Of course, I'm an atheist, but the Unitarians will be kind enough to bury me." Does that sound Boston? That's not Boston, I don't think. Anyway, he always looked as if he were chewing on a lemon, but he was a very influential professor in my life. You have met those, I assume. I remember one day after a plane accident, students were talking about that before class, and someone said it was the hand of God. He looked up and said, "Everyone's always looking for the hand of God," when it was clearly a broken altimeter. So I discovered the Unitarians were around, and I went searching for them. And I found a humanist group in the college town where I was, and they were almost all professors and their families, and lay-led, die-hard humanists. And I was 22 back in those days at that time, and all of these people had gray hair. Yet, unlike the people I knew with gray hair, these were people who were laughing and warm and living their lives still. I said, that's what I want to be like when I've got gray hair. So that was 30 some odd years ago, and I belonged to small lay-led groups during my career as an English professor, as Bill was mentioning. I never heard a UU minister until I think about the year 2000. And I look forward to hearing your stories about how you found Unitarian Universalism. The paths by which people come to Unitarian Universalism are always fascinating and often heart-wrenching. But never have I heard a UU say, "Oh, I don't know, my parents were UUs, so I show up once in a while." UUs tend to care about religion and ideas, to care about the truth and ethics and what it means to live a good life. Unitarian Universalism is a life-changing and life-saving tradition, though we often don't give ourselves credit for that fact. No, we don't go door to door knocking and saying, "I have found the true way." We keep our doors open and wait for people to find us. So here's what I want to send up as a trial balloon. And I want you to think about it. I've been thinking about it, and this is my idea. Perhaps we need to change the way we think about the new people who walk through our doors. The old way of thinking about people who came to UU congregations was that we were taking in refugees. I was one of those when I went to that humanist group in the student union. I knew I was done with the religion of my birth. I knew I was a student of the humanities and that poetry and music and art had far more meaning for me than my religion offered. I knew that these Unitarians I had just heard of were kind enough to bury atheists. But that's about all I knew. I needed a group as a refugee to tell me it was okay to live in the doubt I had. I needed a group to tell me as I waded out into those dark waters that there was indeed a bottom somewhere. I was running from, not necessarily to. I was, like most refugees, as interested in getting away from my present circumstance as caring about where I was going. That was then, and now I'm one of the people with gray hair. So what about now? Because you see, religious observance as a percentage of the U.S. population peaked in the year 1960, which was a few years ago. Furthermore, my generation, the boomers, even when we didn't abandon the religions of our youth, and we did that in huge numbers, but even when we didn't go to church very well. and we didn't stay married very well either. And so, for the next generation, just about everybody under 40 or so, religion was never that huge, coercive cultural force that my generation experienced. It's important to remember that. As a matter of fact, U.S. religion, since the advent of the moral majority, somewhere back there in the late 70s, has been a bit of a sideshow, or maybe a circus, with the main attraction being some screaming right-wingers that very few people actually take seriously. They just look interesting on camera. And a rapidly declining religious center, a silent majority of slightly liberal people who don't quite take their own religions all that seriously, think Lutherans. And so today, 1/3 of the people aged 18 to 30 say they have no religious affiliation. Right? 1/3 of the people today, 18 to 30, say they have no religious affiliation. And furthermore, 88% of those say they are not looking for a religion. They don't care. In other words, they don't like us either. They don't feel like refugees. They're not coming because they're running away from this huge coercive thing called social religion, like I grew up in. Now, has humanism changed, is my question. Or has the need for humanism changed over time since the Second World War, when I was looking for it back in the 1970s? And I hasten to point out that I'm not thinking that Unitarian Universalism or humanism needs to abandon people with gray hair like me. I've grown old in the service of humanism, and I don't hanker to be abandoned now. But since we don't tend to include the apocalypse and the second coming of God as plans for our future, we have to think about it, doing something else, right? I don't think Jesus is going to fix this problem for us. Our task in the present is to nurture what's good, prune what's rotted, and grow a healthy, vibrant humanism for the future. So here's the second part of my trial balloon I want you to think about. What if we consciously decide to stop acting as if we're taking in refugees? What if we reimagine the process and begin welcoming pilgrims instead? Now, pilgrims are not necessarily running away. They may be running toward. They may be searching in their freedom for not for refuge, but for hope and for meaning. Not to hear, as I needed to hear, your doubt is okay, but to hear instead, wow, that doubt thing, that's really cool. That's positive. Oh, the places you'll go. Right? Now, that's just a trial balloon and something I want you to think about this coming week if you feel so inclined, and talk with me a bit about. Should we be thinking pilgrim, not refugee? Now let's imagine for a moment that we can bring Reverend Dietrich back from the grave. We'll put him over here and ask him a question, all right? He's the one who invented this thing called religious humanism, after all. He's the one who thought of reading novels instead of Scripture and started doing it in church, after all. So, Reverend Dietrich, you came up with this religious humanism thing. Here we are in another century. 1/3 of all people under 30 have no religious affiliation. Nearly 6% are atheists or agnostics. Yes, that's about doubled since your time, but that's still a teeny little bit of the population. So, Mr. Dietrich, did we win the war? Did we win the war? Now, I know he was a pacifist, and so I'd have to apologize for that metaphor. Did we win the culture war? I'm afraid he would have to answer no. For one, because he believed so strongly in community. And those nuns, that 33% of the younger population, are not in religious community. The so-called bowling alone phenomenon tells us that Americans today have no place to be other than home and work and a place they rent temporarily, like a coffee shop or a bar or a gym. That would be his first criticism of us today. We aren't packing them into our community. The second reason I think he would say no is because of his deep belief in moral and ethical education. As Alain de Botton was saying in that reading this morning, universities have not done a great job teaching the humanities, right? They teach them, you learn them, but they do not articulate what the humanities can mean in the face of a physician saying, I got some bad news for you, right? Reverend Dietrich believed people needed that kind of learning. Unitarian congregations, he thought, should be a place of continuing, lifelong education in questions of meaning and purpose. Education about the politics of our day, about art, music, literature, those marvelous humanities, education about science and nature, about religion and philosophy, ethics and morals and economics, education about health and aging, birth and death, education about how human beings should act. Yes, we used to do a good job of that for ourselves, but again, we're not packing them in. So, that 1/3 of the population, Socrates doesn't help them very much, does he? When the question of war or injustice comes up, they're not going back to Thoreau's civil disobedience. They haven't learned it. We're not packing them in. And this has to give us pause because we have not won the war. Reverend Dietrich said that the prime task of religion should be to teach, quote, contemplation of the conditions of human life, the reverence for the worth of human life, and the entering into the world so that by human effort life may be improved, end quote. The Humanist Institute puts it this way, quote, life in this world is the central and defining focus of humanism. We envision a world in which every individual's worth is respected and human freedom and behaving responsibly are natural aspirations. Let me repeat that. We envision a world in which human freedom and behaving responsibly are natural aspirations. Now, where is that third of the people learning reason, ethics, and justice? Right? At best, people spend, 2, 4, 6, 8 years in college, right? Most Americans don't read a book again after they graduate from high school. That's the reality we live in. Here is the one place that Reverend Dietrich and my old Pentecostal preacher would agree, as a matter of fact. It's not religion or humanism that won that war. It's not theism or atheism. It was capitalist materialism that won the war. Right? Where do you work? Where do you live? What sort of car do you drive? How much do you make? These are the values that lead our banks and our corporations, our hospitals, our schools, and our governments. The materialist capitalist question is how to be successful, not to be more fully human. Those people need to be here. So, a little story. When I first met one of the leaders of the congregation I now lead in Bloomington, I knew there was a little something about him. He was centered, he was calm, he was considerate, he clearly accepted himself as an adequate human being, he listened to others, and I thought, I'm a little suspicious Sophia Lyon-Fawes had something to do with his education as a kid. And I discovered that he grew up here at FUS. It's not about facts, right? These things affect our entire worldview, our total way of being. Children here are learning to respect themselves and others, to accept themselves and others, to lead lives of meaning and purpose. The old Roman Catholic educational line is, as the twig is bent, so grows the tree, right? We don't bend our kids, right? And if they're not straight, it's okay too, right? We encourage them to be who they really are. And every kid needs that, don't they, Reverend Dietrich? Now, there is hope. I'm almost done, all right? We're running a little late today. Every generation and every time has its challenges and its questions. How will religious humanism meet our immediate challenges and the challenges of our future? That's the question I want to look at this week with you. How can we affect the future with our values of democracy and reason and compassion? Because you didn't come to humanism for the bells and the smells. You didn't come to Unitarian Universalism because we are highly respected in the community. Why did you come to Unitarian Universalism? That's what I want to think about this week. If you will rise, please, as you are willing and able, and turn to our closing hymn, number 347.